A mechanic refused to charge a biker, a simple act of kindness that unknowingly passed a secret ancient test. Now the quiet life he knew is over, replaced by the thunder of a brotherhood's arrival and a staggering inheritance he never wanted. His father's hidden legacy demands a choice: walk away or lead an empire. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. No charge. Leo stared at the grimy, sun-leathered face of the old biker, whose single visible eye, the other hidden behind a patch of faded leather, was wide with disbelief. The man who'd introduced himself only as Grizzly had wobbled into Leo's modest garage, Leo's pit stop, on a beast of a Harley that was coughing black smoke. The fix was stupidly simple. A loose fuel line clamp Leo had tightened with 2 turns of a screwdriver. It had taken 45 seconds. "Son, you don't understand," Grizzly rasped, his voice like gravel under a tire. "The clan has rules. A debt is a debt." Leo wiped his hands on an already blackened rag, a weary smile on his face. He was a man built like the engines he loved, solid, reliable, running on quiet principle. "My garage, my rules. You were stranded. It was nothing. Now get that beautiful girl home before the afternoon heat cooks you both." Grizzly studied him for a long, silent moment, his gaze sweeping over the orderly toolboxes, the photos of classic cars on the walls, the absence of any motorcycle club insignia. A strange, almost imperceptible nod. "Principles, you got your father's hands, Leo." He kicked the engine to life, a thunderous roar that shook the tin roof, and without another word, rumbled out onto the sun-bleached highway. Leo froze, the rag hanging limp in his hand. The cool shadow of the garage bay felt suddenly claustrophobic. His father's hands. He looked down at his own, calloused and stained with permanent lines of oil. They were a mechanic's hands. He'd always thought they were his own. The memory of Marcus was a locked box in his mind, wrapped in the smell of whiskey, leather, and distant thunder, the sound of motorcycles leaving and never coming back. His mother had said he died in a road accident when Leo was 16. She moved them across 3 states, her eyes forever holding a faint, lingering fear before cancer took her too. Leo had built his life on simplicity and silence, brick by quiet brick, to keep that thunder at bay. Shaking off the chill, he threw himself back into the guts of a '67 Mustang, losing himself in the tangible logic of pistons and carburetors. But the seed of unease was planted. It sprouted roots as the afternoon sun began its descent, painting the dusty sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. It wasn't a sound at first, but a vibration, a tremor in the concrete floor that traveled up through the soles of his worn boots into the marrow of his bones. Then it became a hum, a low, pervasive drone that grew and grew, layering upon itself until it was a physical pressure in his chest, a symphony of controlled thunder that made the tools on their pegs shiver and dance. Leo stepped out of the garage bay, the late-day sun hitting him like a wall of heat. The rag fell from his fingers, unnoticed. They came from both ends of the lonely desert road, a river of gleaming chrome and black steel, a vision from a dream he'd spent a lifetime suppressing. Harley-Davidsons, not just dozens, but a legion, their headlights cutting through the gauzy twilight like the accusing eyes of a mechanical army. They didn't roar, they processed. With a precision that was terrifying in its silence, they formed perfect, menacing rows in front of his small, vulnerable lot, engines cutting off in a wave until the sudden, absolute silence was louder than the noise had been. The only sound was the tink-tink of cooling metal and the soft scuff of boots on asphalt. 50 bikers, men and women, their faces a topography of hard living and fierce loyalty, clad in leather vests adorned with a single, intricate patch, a winged skull cradling a blood-red rose under the legend Iron Legacy MC. They dismounted as one, the movement fluid and practiced, a single organism. And at their head was Grizzly, transformed. The stranded old man was gone. In his place stood a pillar of the desert, his spine straight, his single eye gleaming with an ancient authority. Beside him stood a woman who made Leo's heart trip over a beat. She was maybe in her late 30s, with dark, espresso-colored hair pulled into a severe, practical braid that somehow accentuated the elegant line of her neck. Her eyes were the color of a storm-churned sea, gray and green and endlessly deep. Her gaze, when it found his, wasn't just a look. It was an assessment, a challenge, a touch that lingered in the charged air between them. Her leathers, worn soft in all the right places, fit like a second skin, and the property of no one patch on her vest seemed less a statement and more a direct, personal dare. This was Elena. Grizzly stepped forward, the crowd parting for him without a word. "Leo," his voice now carried across the lot, rich with a timbre of command. "You passed the test." "Test," Leo managed, the words scraping out of his dry throat. His eyes flickered to Elena, who held his gaze, unblinking. "Your father, Marcus, was our president, our true president," Grizzly said, and the name hung in the air between them, a ghost given flesh. "Before he stepped away to give you a normal life, he thought he was protecting you. Our charter has a rule, a sacred one, older than any of us. The leader is chosen not by bloodline but by heart, by an act of selfless principle, witnessed unknowingly by a senior member. That loose fuel line was your crucible. By refusing payment, by showing grace to an old stranger without expectation, you proved you have his heart. You are the rightful heir to the Iron Legacy, to all of it." Leo's mind was a whirring engine with no clutch, spinning uselessly. The quiet mechanic, the man who prized predictable outcomes and the smell of clean oil, was being offered a kingdom of chaos and chrome. I don't want an empire," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. "I have my garage, my life, it's enough." A new voice cut through, smooth as aged whiskey but with the bite of broken glass. It belonged to a tall, handsome man with hair the color of winter wheat and eyes so pale blue they seemed to reflect no light at all. He wore a vice president patch. "That's not how this works, kid." The disdain in the word was a physical slap. "The legacy is a hobby you can pick up or put down. It's a family, a business, a responsibility. Your father's legacy, which you've just inherited by your own actions, includes our legitimate enterprises, our history, and our less public ventures. You don't just get to refuse. The world doesn't work that way." Elena moved then, a panther's grace that placed her subtly between Leo and the VP, whose name Leo would learn was Kalen. "The choice," she said, her voice lower, meant for Leo alone, yet carrying to the front ranks, "is yours to make. The charter says you must be offered the mantle. But Kalen is right about one thing. Some choices come with consequences, no matter which path you pick." Her stormy eyes held his, and in their depths, he saw a flicker of something that wasn't about motorcycles or empires. It was a spark of recognition, of a similar loneliness, of a shared, unspoken defiance. It was immediate, electrifying, and terrifying. Grizzly gestured with a gnarled hand, and two massive bikers wheeled forward not a chest of gold or a bag of cash, but something that made Leo's mechanic heart stutter and then pound against his ribs, a motorcycle. But not just any bike. It was a fully restored, immaculate 1947 knucklehead, its paint a deep, liquid sapphire that seemed to drink the dying light and glow from within. It was rolling sculpture, a king's ransom on two wheels, and it was the most beautiful machine Leo had ever seen. "A gift," Grizzly intoned, "from your father's personal collection. The first of many. He'd want you to have it. Come to the compound tomorrow, see what you're being offered, see your birthright, then decide." The army remounted with that same eerie synchronicity. As Elena swung a leg over her own bike, a sleek black fat boy, she looked back at Leo one last time. The hardness in her gaze had softened, just a fraction, into something like pity or perhaps invitation. "Don't keep us waiting, Leo. The quiet life, it's a beautiful illusion, but it's still an illusion. And once you've seen what's out here, you can never really go back to believing in it." The first engine roared to life, then another, and another, until 50 engines ignited the night, a sound so vast it felt like the sky was tearing. Then they were gone, vanishing into the deepening desert dark, leaving Leo alone in a silence that was now profoundly, irrevocably different. He didn't sleep. He paced the worn floorboards of his small apartment above the garage, the ghost of the knucklehead gleaming in his lot below like a forbidden jewel. His father's old, locked footlocker, which had followed him from every dingy rental to this place he called his own, seemed to pulse from the corner of his bedroom. He never opened it. It was part of the silence he kept. But now, the silence was broken. As a faint pre-dawn light bled into the sky, he took a crowbar to the rusted padlock. The metal shrieked in protest. Inside, there were no faded photographs of father and son, no tender letters. There were ledgers, their columns filled with meticulous entries in his father's sharp, angular handwriting. maps of the state with routes marked in red, a heavy oak gavel, its head worn smooth from use, a set of dog tags, and a deed to a vast, unnamed plot of land in the remote Canyonlands, simply called the Roost. Curiosity was a hook in his gut, but it was the haunting, storm-gray echo of Elena's eyes that finally dragged him onto the knucklehead later that morning. The engine caught with a deep, visceral cough that settled into a rhythmic, powerful thrum. It felt alive in his hands. The ride to the coordinates on the deed was a blur of hypnotic asphalt and rising heat. The Roost wasn't just a compound, it was a fortress hidden in the skeletal embrace of red rock canyons. A high, wire-topped gate swung open before him, revealing a sprawling, dusty metropolis of purpose. State-of-the-art motorcycle workshops buzzing with the shriek of grinders and the scent of welding torches, a sprawling bar and grill named The Broken Spoke, already doing a lively lunch trade, tidy rows of cabins, a community garden, even a small clinic. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem, a town built by and for the club. But Leo, with his mechanic's eye for stress fractures, saw the other things too. The silent, watchful men with coiled spring tension at the main gate, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses. The heavy, reinforced doors on a separate, windowless warehouse where Kalen held court, speaking in low tones to men who looked like they'd never smiled. The way conversations in the common yard would suddenly hush as he rode past on his father's bike, only to resume in lower, more urgent murmurs. Grizzly gave him the tour, a proud, gruff grandfather showing off his life's work. Your father built all this. The legit businesses first, the custom shop, the bar. He wanted to build something clean, something that could last for you. He funneled everything into it. But the past, Leo, the past has long shadows and creditors who don't deal in dollars. We protect what's ours. That sometimes requires walking in those shadows. Leo's first official club meeting was a baptism by fire and whiskey. Held in the chapel, a room dominated by a massive, scarred oak table that felt older than the rocks outside. It was a chaotic, loud, and strangely democratic affair. Arguments erupted over supply lines for the custom parts business, heated disputes with a rival club, the Desert Vultures, over territory for their charity toy runs, the intricate planning of a massive fundraising rally for veterans. The air was thick with cigar smoke, testosterone, and the raw energy of conflicting wills. Kalen presided from the head of the table with a cold, surgical efficiency, constantly needling Leo, who sat in a chair along the wall, an observer. Perhaps our new heir has an opinion on the vultures' encroachment, or is your expertise limited to 10mm sockets? Kalen's smile was a thin, cruel line. A hot flush climbed Leo's neck, but before he could form a retort, Elena's voice, cool and clear, cut through the noise from her seat at the table's center. He's observing, Kalen, learning the board before he moves a piece. It's a strategic skill, one you might consider learning. Her defense, delivered in front of the entire senior membership, was a flag planted in the ground. The charged, lingering glance they shared across the smoky room was full of unspoken volts, a connection that drew curious and calculating looks from the others. The real test came not from the table, but from the world beyond the canyon. A crucial deal for a batch of ultra-rare, vintage panhead engines, the cornerstone of 3 high six-figure custom builds for celebrity clients, had gone catastrophically sour. The supplier, a slippery black market parts magnate named Dragovich, was suddenly tripling the price at the 11th hour, knowing the legacy's reputation and contracts were on the line. In the emergency meeting, Kalen's solution was pure, brutal force. We take what we paid for, we show up, we show force, we take the engines, we show weakness now, we're finished. This is how we've always handled pirates. A tense silence followed, heavy with reluctant agreement. Leo, his stomach churning, heard himself speak. The words came out quiet at first, then gained strength. So we pay him with his own coin. All eyes swiveled to him, some annoyed, some curious. He's exploiting a perceived need. What if we didn't need him? Not all of him anyway. He stood, walking to a whiteboard. I've been through the shop inventory for the last week. Between the spare parts here, the 2 damaged panhead blocks in the salvage corner, and what I can source from 3 of my contacts in the vintage restoration world, people who owe me favors, not fear, we can completely rebuild 2 of the 5 engines from the ground up. We deliver those first to our 2 most important clients. We don't deliver just an engine, we deliver a story. Hand-built, one of a kind, resurrected in the heart of the Iron Legacy shop. The exclusivity value isn't just maintained, it skyrockets. The other 3 clients will wait willingly because now they'll be demanding the legacy special. Dragovich's untouched crates just became common, mass-produced junk. His leverage is gone. Then we go back to him and count off half his original price, take it or leave it. The silence in the chapel was profound, broken only by the hum of the neon beer sign in the corner. Then a low, rumbling chuckle started in Grizzly's chest. It spread around the table, growing into genuine, relieved laughter. It was elegant, it was clever, it was business. It wasn't the club way, but it was a new way that smelled like victory, not blood. Elena's look of stunned, proud surprise, the way her lips parted slightly, the approval lighting her stormy eyes, was a reward that made Leo's pulse thunder in his ears. After the meeting broke up, he found himself in the main workshop, pretending to examine a CNC lathe, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. The scent of ozone, metal, and oil was a comfort. That, her voice came from behind him, was a hell of a move. He turned. Elena leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, the dim workshop light carving shadows into the planes of her face. It was just logic, he said. It was leadership, she corrected, pushing off the frame and walking towards him. The space between them seemed to shrink and crackle. You saw the board differently. You reminded some of us who we started out trying to be, before the money got so loud. She was close now. He could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose, the small, pale scar that bisected her left eyebrow. Her scent, leather and jasmine, and a hint of gun oil enveloped him. I don't know if I'm built for any of this, Leo admitted, the confession torn from him. You are, she whispered, her voice suddenly husky. Her fingers came up, surprisingly soft against his work-rough skin, and brushed a smudge of grease from his cheekbone. The touch was a lightning strike, simple and devastating. His breath hitched. He was drowning in the storm of her eyes. He leaned in, drawn by an irresistible magnetic gravity. Her lips were inches from his, her breath warm. The door to the workshop banged open violently, ricocheting off the wall. Kalen stood there, a silhouette of contained fury, his pale eyes missing nothing, the intimate proximity, the charged air, the intimate gesture. The moment shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces. Planning the future of the club without the table's input, Elena, he said, his voice dripping with a false, venomous cheer. How progressive. The rally is in 2 days. Everyone's particular skills are required on the perimeter detail. His gaze landed on Leo, full of promised malice. Even the new blood, time to earn your keep. The rally was the club's annual public face, a massive, family-friendly festival of bikes, music and food that took over a county fairground, raising substantial money for local veterans' families. Leo, in a worn, patchless leather vest they'd given him, worked like a dog. He hauled barriers, wired sound equipment, and sweated alongside prospectors and full-patch members alike. He saw the club in a completely new light here, the most fearsome-looking, to 2 giants gently hoisting toddlers onto their shoulders to see a band, the women serving heaping plates of food with warm smiles, the collective effort for something purely good. He was manning a lemonade stand, of all things, when a little girl no older than 6, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit, stared wide-eyed at his exposed forearms. You have pictures on you, she declared, pointing a sticky finger. Leo laughed, a genuine, unfettered sound. He crouched down, showing her the intricate sleeve of tattoos, not skulls or daggers, but interlocking gears, pistons, drive belts, and a single perfect rose he'd gotten for his mother. This one, he said, pointing to a small, smiling robot holding a wrench, is Otto. He loves giving oil changes, but he always gets a little messy. He made a silly, sputtering sound, and the girl giggled, a pure, ringing sound. He didn't see Elena watching from across the way, a cold beer forgotten in her hand. The unguarded smile on her face, the softening of every hard edge as she watched him with the child, was a transformation. Her heart did a slow, painful, wonderful roll in her chest. She saw not the air, not the mechanic, but the man, a man who carried gentleness in his hands despite their strength. Nor did he see Kalen, observing her observe him. The VP stood in the shadow of a food truck, his handsome face a mask of cold, seething fury. The bottle in his hand wasn't just gripped. His knuckles were white, the glass threatening to shatter. The affection in Alina's eyes was a flame he'd never been able to ignite, and seeing it directed at this outsider, this mechanic, was an insult that burned deeper than any rival's challenge. That night, back at the roost, bonfires painted dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Blues music from a live band wove through the laughter and clink of bottles. Leo and Alina found themselves alone by the old, stone-lined fire pit at the edge of the compound, the festivities a warm hum in the background. The chemistry between them was a living, breathing thing, fed by the day's shared purpose and the unspoken victory over Kaylin's pettiness. "It's different than I ever imagined," Leo said, watching the flames devour a piece of mesquite. "Out there today, it wasn't an empire, it was a home, people looking out for each other." "It can be," Alina said softly, her shoulder brushing against his as she settled on the log beside him. The contact sent a jolt through him. "It was once, when my father and yours were at this table, before Marcus left to protect you, before Kaylin started seeing everything, our loyalty, our history, our roots, as just assets on a balance sheet to be leveraged." She opened up then, her voice low and heartfelt. She spoke of her father, Marcus's sergeant at arms and best friend, dying in a senseless, suspicious warehouse fire years ago. She spoke of growing up in this compound, loved, but always having to be twice as tough. Of her vow to protect her father's memory and Marcus's original vision from being gutted by Kaylin's insatiable ambition. He wants to expand the shadow work, the shipping routes we control for moving custom parts and vintage bikes. He has plans to use them for other, darker cargo. Your arrival, an heir with a mechanic's soul and no taste for a real fight, is the perfect excuse for him to push you out, declare you unfit, and seize control completely. "And where do you stand?" Leo asked, turning to face her fully. The firelight played in her hair, glinted in her eyes. "I stand," she whispered, her gaze dropping to his lips, then back to his eyes, "right here." She closed the final, breathless inch between them. The kiss was not gentle. It was a confluence, a claiming, a release of weeks of taut tension and unspoken understanding. It tasted of cheap beer, wood smoke, and a desperate, hungry hope. Her hands fisted in the front of his vest, pulling him closer, her body aligning with his. One of his hands cupped the back of her neck, the other splayed against the small of her back, feeling the supple strength of her through the leather. For a moment, the entire legacy, the danger, the politics, the weight of the past, dissolved into the crackle of the fire and the thrilling exploration of her mouth. But empires, especially those balanced on a knife's edge, are not won or lost in kisses, no matter how potent. The confrontation, when it came, was swift and brutal. Days after the rally's success, Kaylin, his patience evaporated, laid his cards on the table in a closed-session chapel meeting, only the most trusted senior members present. "Sentiment isn't profit," he roared, slamming his palm on the ancient oak so hard a glass rattled. "We're having a goddamn tea party while our rivals, the vultures, are moving in on our southern routes. They're cutting into our parts shipments, our charity runs, our territory. We need to strike hard and fast and reclaim what's ours with force, not with business plans and lemonade stands." His icy eyes swept the room, landing on Leo with contempt. "Or are we now a club led by an accountant in a grease monkey's clothes?" The challenge hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Leo felt the eyes of the old wolves upon him, grisly, a grizzled man named Bear with knuckles like walnuts, a fierce older woman called Maud who ran their logistics. This was the moment, the crossroads between his father's two worlds. He stood slowly, the legs of his chair scraping on the concrete floor. "My father's legacy," he began, his voice quiet but cutting through the tension, "wasn't built on fear. It was built on respect. You might win a fight with the vultures today, Kaylin, but you'll start a war that will burn down everything, the custom shop, the broken spoke, the veterans fund, the trust of this town, everything we've built that's actually good and lasting." He turned to address the room, his heart hammering. "Give me 1 week. Let me talk to Briggs, their president, not as a fighter, but as a businessman, a mechanic who understands supply and demand. Maybe there's a stretch of road wide enough for both of us to ride." Kaylin sneered, a grotesque expression. "You'll walk in there and get a bullet in your brain pan for your courtesy. You'll get us all killed." "I'll go with him," Alina said, rising to stand beside Leo. Her solidarity was a tangible force in the room, a shield and a statement. "And I," rumbled Grizzly, heaving his bulk upright. "Been 20 years since I shared a drink with Briggs. Might be time." The vote was tense and split, but the show of support from Alina and the old-timer carried it. Leo had his week. The meet with the vultures was set at a neutral, dusty truck stop diner on the edge of nowhere. The air was thick with the smell of fried grease and tension. Briggs, the vultures' president, was a mountain of a man with a beard like a thorn bush and eyes that had seen every kind of double-cross. Armed men lounged against bikes on both sides of the parking lot, a silent, deadly audience. Leo didn't talk territory or threats. He spread schematics and logistics maps on the sticky Formica table. He'd spent 3 days and nights studying both clubs' operations, their strengths, their choke points. You need reliable, unmolested access to the Southern Highway for your long-haul custom jobs for the Hollywood crowd. We control that corridor through historical understanding with the local authorities. He paused, letting the euphemism hang. We need secure, discreet warehouse space near the port you control for receiving overseas container shipments of vintage parts. Instead of both of us paying through the nose for security to third-party leeches we trade, we grant you escorted access through our corridor. You lease us your portside warehouse at a fair, long-term rate. We both slash our overhead. We both grow stronger. It's not a partnership. It's a business deal. The first of many, maybe. Briggs stared at him, chewing on a toothpick, his gaze flicking between Leo, Alina's calm defiance, and Grizzly's stoic presence. A business deal with the Iron Legacy. He sounded incredulous. Your boy Kalen's been saber-rattling for months. Kalen isn't speaking for the Legacy today, Alina said, her voice flat and final. An hour of grueling, granular negotiation followed. Finally, Briggs spat out his toothpick and extended a hand like a bear's paw. All right, a trial run, 6 months, but one hint of bad faith, one of my trucks gets so much as a scratch. Then we're back to where we started, Leo finished, gripping the man's hand. It wasn't friendship. It was a ceasefire with mutual profit. Leo had done the impossible. He'd forged a peace with a hammer of logic, not a fist of fear. They returned to the roost as heroes. The news spread through the compound like a wildfire of relief and renewed pride. The club's mood shifted palpably, definitively in Leo's favor. That night, the Broken Spoke was a riot of celebration. In a shadowed alcove near the old jukebox, Alina pulled Leo to her, her body melting into his as their lips met. This kiss was different, celebratory, possessive, full of a shared triumph and a Chinese letter promise. "You did it," she breathed against his mouth, her hands sliding under his shirt, tracing the hard planes of his back, her touch leaving trails of fire. He groaned, pulling her tighter against him, the world narrowing to the feel of her, the taste of her lips and skin, the desperate, hungry promise of what was to come later in the quiet sanctuary of her cabin. There, away from prying eyes, whispered words of admiration and desire mingled with the rustle of clothing, the meeting of skin, a union that was as much about sealing a pact of the heart as it was about physical passion. It was a night where the outside world ceased to exist, replaced by the language of touch and breath. Kalen's fury, however, was volcanic. He saw his path to absolute power crumbling to dust. In a last, desperate and reckless move, he orchestrated a double-edged betrayal designed to destroy Leo's credibility and his spirit. He leaked carefully fabricated information to the vultures, suggesting Leo's deal was an elaborate trap to lull them before a massive, coordinated attack to seize all their territory. Simultaneously, he sent 2 of his most loyal, disposable prospects to Leo's sanctuary, his true home, Leo's pit stop. Leo got the call from a frantic neighbor at dawn. He raced back, a cold dread in his gut. The scene was one of visceral, personal violation. The front window was a glittering carpet of shards. His prized tool cabinets, the inheritance from his first mentor, were pried open and emptied, thousands of dollars of specialized tools gone. The worst was the '67 Mustang he'd been restoring for a year. It had been pushed off the hydraulic lift, landing on its roof with a scream of twisting metal, its pristine new paint now a spiderweb of devastating cracks. Leo stood in the center of the wreckage, the cold hand of despair and rage squeezing his heart until he couldn't breathe. This was the cost. This was the unvarnished truth of the shadow world. This was what they did to what you loved. The quiet life wasn't just over, it had been desecrated. He was done. He would walk away, let the legacy tear itself apart. He started throwing what was left of his unbroken belongings into a duffel bag. The roar of a single motorcycle approached, not a pack. Elena and Grizzly found him there, amidst the ruins. Elena took one look at his face, at the shattered car, and her own expression hardened into something deadly. She didn't offer empty comfort. She walked over, took his greasy, clenched fists in her own, and forced him to look at her. "Running now is exactly what he wants," she said, her voice low and fierce. "It proves his point to every doubter in the club that you're not one of us, that you don't have the heart to stand and fight for your family when they hit you where you live. This," she gestured at the vandalism, her own eyes blazing, "isn't the family business. This is one man's poison, and the club is sick of it, but they need to see you stand. Now, not as a mechanic, as Marcus's son." Grizzly nodded, his face grave. "The table needs to see the steel, boy, or all this was for nothing." The final confrontation was not a meeting, it was a tribunal, and the chapel had never felt more like a courtroom. Leo stood before the assembled senior members, not in a clean cut, but in his oil-stained jeans and a torn t-shirt, the evidence of the attack written on his clothes and his face. With a cold, terrifying calm, he laid it all out. He presented the digital trail, the leaked messages from a terminal only Kalen could access, the financial withdrawal used to pay the prospects, time-stamped security camera footage from a nearby gas station showing the prospects' truck. He spoke not with the roaring rage of a biker, but with the hollow, profound disappointment of a son whose inheritance was being poisoned from within. "You attacked my home," Leo said, his voice trembling with an emotion so raw it held the room captive. "My father's legacy wasn't metal and money and territory, it was this." He slammed his open hand on the table, the sound like a gunshot. He pointed at each member in turn, Grizzly, Bear, Maud, Elena. It was loyalty that meant something. It was the club watching each other's kids grow up. It was fixing a stranded biker's bike for free because it's the right damn thing to do. You betrayed that. For what? For a bigger slice of a pie you're willing to poison for everyone. You're not protecting the legacy, you're digging its grave. The silence was absolute, heavy with shame and dawning anger. Kalen, cornered and seeing the verdict in every pair of eyes, snarled, "You sanctimonious pup." He went for the pistol at his back. He never cleared leather. In a blur of motion almost too fast to follow, Elena had her own knife, a wickedly sharp, ancient Bowie knife that had been her father's, pressed against the pulse point of Kalen's throat, a bead of blood welling instantly. Her face was a mask of lethal serenity. "The table," she hissed, the words slicing the air, "has heard enough. The table votes, all in favor of stripping Kalen of his patch and his membership. For betrayal of the Iron Legacy and its members, say aye." The roar of aye that shook the very walls of the chapel was unanimous, thunderous, and final. Kalen was stripped of his vest, the patches torn off in a ritual of disgrace. He was marched out at gunpoint, exiled under threat of death should he ever be seen near Legacy territory again. His sputtered threats faded into the indifferent desert wind. In the heavy, purifying silence that followed, Grizzly walked to a locked cabinet. From it, he drew a leather vest. It was the same cut, but the leather was newer, yet aged to a rich, deep brown. On the back was the full, magnificent, pristine Iron Legacy patch, the winged skull, the blood-red rose. On the front, where the president's patch would go, it was deliberately, respectfully blank. He held it out to Leo. "The table has one more vote," Grizzly said, his old, wise voice thick with emotion. "All in favor of Leo, son of Marcus, taking his father's empty chair as president of the Iron Legacy Motorcycle Club, say aye." This time the roar was not just agreement, it was an acclamation. It was a sound built on respect, earned through cunning, courage, and an unshakable heart. Aye. Leo stood, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He looked at Elena, who gave him a slow, proud, tear-glazed nod, her knife now sheathed, her hand resting on the back of his father's old chair. He looked at the faces of his club, his family, forged in this fire. He took the vest from Grizzly and slipped it on. The leather felt strange, stiff, but as he shrugged it into place, it felt like something slotting into a space he never knew was empty. It felt like coming home. Later, under canopy of a million diamond-bright desert stars, Leo and Elena sat on the seat of the Sapphire Knucklehead, parked on the highest bluff overlooking the roost. The compound below was a constellation of its own, alive with light, laughter, and the distant, comforting rumble of a bike on the night road. Her head was tucked against his shoulder, his arm wrapped tightly around her, holding her to him as if she were the anchor in this new, tempestuous sea. "So," she murmured, her voice vibrating against his chest, "quiet life, officially over, Mr. President." Leo looked down at the vibrant, flawed, breathing community below. He thought of his smashed garage, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would rebuild it, not as an escape, but as an outpost of his own. A place where the principles of the heart, honesty, a fair price, a helping hand, could still be found with a simple turn of a wrench. It would be a bridge between his two worlds. "Yeah," he said, turning his head to kiss her hair, his heart so full it ached with a beautiful, terrifying joy. "But I think I found a better one." In the distance, the lone roar of a motorcycle echoed through the canyon walls, not a threat, but a promise. The road ahead was long, winding, and perilous, paved with both sunlight and shadow. But for the first time since he could remember, Leo wasn't facing it. Leo smiled, wiping a smudge of grease from the knucklehead's tank. The legacy wasn't just an empire of chrome. It was the weight of the vest on his shoulders, Elena's hand in his, and the rumble of 50 engines at his back. He'd rebuild his garage, a symbol of the heart that won his throne. The road ahead was theirs to pave. A blend of shadow and principle. As the sun set, painting the canyon in fire, he knew the quiet life was gone. In its place, he'd found something louder, truer, and his own. Thank you for riding with us on this incredible journey. If this story of loyalty and unexpected legacy moved you, smash that subscribe button. Tell us in the comments, if a mysterious motorcycle club rolled up to your door, what would you do? And drop your location. We love seeing where our family is watching from.